What is the first game you think of when you hear the word horror? For many, as my poll confirmed, it is Resident Evil, the granddaddy of all survival horror. It's been a while since we had any new Resident Evil, so let's see if we can find any good alternatives.
Deep Sea 15! Shit! It's a Cade Corp rig!
Still no response. No comms, no power.
One of the many things that always keeps me coming back to the Resident Evil series, and no, it's not the amazing voice acting of the earlier games.
This house is dangerous. There are terrible demons. Ouch!
No, look at these moments. Here in Resident Evil 5, Jill suddenly comes back from the dead with superpowers. Or this one with Chris. Suddenly it ties Resident Evil 7 back to all the mainline games. But even this from the very first game, where Wesker turns out to be the bad guy. And of course... well, maybe not that one. But what do all of these moments have to do with each other? One crazy overarching storyline that's been going on for years and keeps drawing me back in. Now, to bring it back to the game in question, this game does not have the crazy multi-game spanning storyline, but Stasis Bone Totem does tell a pretty great story that reminds me in a lot of ways of Resident Evil. There are certain locations that lend itself perfect for a good horror game. Insane asylums, haunted mansions, creepy forests, but also, as it turns out, abandoned oil rigs. Which is where Mac and Charlie, a husband and wife salvage team, find themselves. They are on hard times and really need this to work out. Thus, clear warnings get ignored, bad decisions get made, and they end up miles underwater in a research facility where stuff has obviously gone very wrong. The game plays out largely as a point-and-click adventure. But, believe you me, if you think those can be creepy and atmospheric, your opinion is wrong.
God, that woman needed help. I didn't know what type of parasite she had encountered, but it had planted something inside her.
Spider-Man, save me! I'll save you. What do you mean with life? When I think Resident Evil, aside from the obviously amazing story, what immediately jumps to mind for me is this. Of course, we can't forget about Lady Dimitrescu. The monsters are always iconic. Now, you can say a lot about our next game, and in many ways it's just very underrated. But its monster design is amazing. There's only one, but believe me, you don't need any more than that. Yes, this is Alien Isolation, best to be described as an adult hide-and-seek simulator, but you're the mouse and the seeker is a giant cat with acid for blood. Aside from that, the game has a lot of gameplay similarities with the older Resident Evils. There's safe rooms, item management, and an almost Metroidvania-like level layout where you need certain abilities to get through areas. And of course, the nail-biting tension. One of the scariest scenes in any horror game has to be this one. We find ourselves in House Beneviento, Resident Evil 8. This scene is so creepy. And let me ask you a question. What makes it so scary? Yes, you can hardly see a hand before your eyes. Oh, and also they took your guns. But really what this scene does so well, and many other Resident Evils, is sound design. A much overlooked feature in many games. Now let me play you a scene from our alternative game. I would argue that the sound design in Dead Space is what makes the game stand out beyond the Rebel. You hear them, but you never know exactly where they're coming from. What I love too is how they sneak up on you. They don't just attack you right away. No, they come at you, and then when you turn around and see them, that's when they get at you, setting you up for that underwear change waiting to happen. Number 8. A lot of people don't like this next game, but I honestly don't really know why.
What the is this?
tie it back into the Resident Evil series first. When we say survival horror, what does that really mean? There's of course your item management, lack of resources, there have to be sporadic save rooms to ram the tension, but most of all, if your name is Resident Evil, you have to alternate pants-pooping tension, exploration, and crazy, unrealistic, but usually fun puzzle solving to open any kind of door. And our next game does all of this in spades. But what's really cool about the medium is its setup. Because as the titular medium, you play simultaneously in the real world and the spirit world. As you can imagine, this leads to some great puzzles, where both real world and spirit mechanics need to get utilized to progress throughout the game. Really cool. Don't play this on the Steam Deck, by the way, because the game's optimization is a mess.
My name comes up, your books come up, you come up. I've read them. There are echoes of my life in there that makes me feel like someone's been watching me.
I just rewatched all the Resident Evil movies. Yes, for fun. They do so many things wrong, but there's one thing that saves it. It follows the Resident Evil lore. Nah, that's giving it too much credit, but it does make use of it. My point being, the Resident Evil lore, from the Nemesis hunting STARS members, Albert Wesker's red eyes behind his sunglasses after taking the T-virus, to Barry Burton's little getup, this lore is good enough to save a hot mess like the Resident Evil movie series. That and Mila Jovovich, of course. Our alternative game in question, Alan Wake 2, in my opinion trumps the Resident Evil lore by a mile. Which makes sense because the whole premise is about a horror writer and his books turning real. Didn't they do that in The Mouth of Madness? The titular writer Alan Wake and FBI agent Saga Anderson both get wrapped up in one of Alan's stories as everything he puts on paper becomes real. The storytelling is incredible. It's a really interesting dynamic. One of the first scenes plays in a morgue. The body you're investigating comes to life and some of the local cops turn into Taken, the game's kitchen variety enemy. Afterwards you find a page narrating everything that just happened, including interesting insights in what the cops were thinking and feeling when they were turned. It's really cool.
Nightingale hunted Saga. Didn't see her. The Taken could not see into bright light. Light hurt them.
Other times you get hints and clues about what's going to happen or how to defeat enemies. It's beautifully done. Worth a pick up if you haven't yet. I probably shouldn't tell you this story because it's pretty lame, but when I played Resident Evil 2 back in 1998, admittedly way too young, there's a moment in the game where this innocent little girl who has nothing to do with anything, I believe her name is Sherry, gets infected with the T-virus. All this crazy stuff is happening to her and then she passes out. After that scene, literally for weeks I had to sleep with the nightlight on. All I could think about was this little girl by herself in this abandoned research facility in a city full of monsters. And it was the atmosphere of that game, just the terror that little girl must have felt, with the touching story that made me feel so bad. I'm an adult now, so I don't lay in bed with the nightlight on anymore. Usually, but The Evil Within 2 does take me way back. It hits that similar tone. Sebastian Castellano, detective extraordinaire, has to go find his daughter who's been trapped in a simulation where things have gone horribly wrong. Think The Matrix if it was a horror movie. But the crazy thing? Lily was presumed dead in a fire years ago. The tone of the open world 2 really reminds me of those old school early Resident Evil games, with hallmark locations like an abandoned school, a theater, catacombs, and of course laboratories. I could talk about the excellent monster design or the unusual open world stealth gameplay, but I'm going to leave that for another time. Take the plunge and play this game. This one's a bit of a cheat because I'm running out of categories and still have 4 more to go. But let me ask you this, if Capcom released a new game today in the style of the original 3 Resident Evils, you get to play it but nobody told you it was going to be Resident Evil or Capcom was making it, would you still know it was Resident Evil? I bet you would. All the classic tells would still be there. And that's exactly what it feels like playing Crow Country. Somebody put me in a room and didn't tell me I was going to play Resident Evil. This game is a homage to those early games. From the PS1 era graphics, the save rooms, the aim, shoot but can't walk mechanics, it's all there. Crow Country, the abandoned theme park you're investigating, is also a great location for a horror game like this. Although I guess Silent Hill 3 did it first. Plus, the disappearance mystery of Edward Crow you're trying to solve, of course dissolves into a crazy Resident Evil-like plot. Yes, give it a try. just did this Metroidvania tournament video, and I've always thought that the Resident Evil games in many ways were some of the earliest Metroidvanias, with its level structure set up in such a way that you need certain abilities, read keys or objects, to move ahead and explore its world further. Our next game does all of this very well, while of course having that classic Resident Evil feel. In our number 4 on the list, you'll be seeing a lot of this. You'll be able to explore a significant amount of the creepy abandoned mining facility you find yourself in. You'll be finding objects and memos and things to investigate, enemies, and of course the occasional save room. Then however, you'll be stuck and need to use whatever you found and learned to overcome your current obstacles. You'll be doing this a lot in Signalis, be it puzzles, enemies, or just locked doors that need to be lockpicked. The setup is that classic Resident Evil, and if I may say so, the rest of the game is pretty darn good too. Alright, we're about to crack into that top 3, and I'd say these 3 could easily be swapped around. I absolutely love horror movies and video games. Being scared in a controlled environment and just completely getting enveloped in the movie or game, really feeling that fear. But when you're done, just put it all away and think to yourself, well, at least my life isn't that screwed up. The Resident Evil games are scary, some more than others. But I think what Song of Horror, or number 3 on the list, does exceptionally well is build a very interesting mystery that makes the game scary. I don't want to give too much away, but since it's in the title, here's the premise. People are disappearing and you need to investigate. But that's not all. Song of Horror has some of the most effective horror game mechanics I've ever seen in a game. They're very simple yet different. First off, the game has permadeath. So once your character dies, they're gone. Now, I didn't realize this at first and quickly lost my first character early on in an episode. However, that doesn't mean game over, as you have a few characters to choose from, basically acting as lives. With this semi-permadeath comes some very cool mechanics. For example, you need to listen at doors to make sure the room is safe. The darkness can also close in at you at any time, which means you might have to hold the door closed as it tries to come in. Or you have to hide under a table, or in a dresser or something. This all leads to some very tense atmosphere. One wrong decision and you might lose that favorite character. It is super creepy. There are a lot more of these mechanics, but I don't want to give too much away because each one of them is very unique. I actually can't believe I only recently discovered this game. This is one great horror game. Oh hi, don't mind me, I'm just writing some bad dialogue on my realistic typewriter with a candle, as writers do. Earlier I mentioned the amazing voice acting of the first games, and this is of course another staple of the Resident Evil games. Who could forget little gems like... or this one.
I'm sorry that you were worried about me.
We are in great danger. We must organize a search for the others and get the hell out of here. Understood?
Yes, sir!
I love Resident Evil 1 so much, and while no game will ever reach the truly legendary heights of the Resident Evil voice acting, games can try, and one such game comes pretty close.
You need to be what happened to you?
Save your resuscitation techniques for those 2 nice guys down there.
None of the lines are as hilarious, but the overall B-movie feel of Daymare 1994 is just great. The government has lost all contact with, wait for it, Area 52, and they send a super elite military unit by the name of Hades to investigate. But once you get there, things don't get any less cliche. Take a look at these guys. These are the main enemies, your classic reanimated corpse. Although, to give the game some credit, reanimation happens by these little clouds of electricity which can jump from body to body, and if you don't take them down fast enough, can lead to some really hectic battles. I know all of this sounds like a criticism of the game, but really it wouldn't be on number 2 if it didn't have a lot going for itself. That classic Resident Evil feel is here. Puzzles, fighting, save rooms, it all feels really good. Cheesy voice acting, like I mentioned earlier, is also great. Plus it's a budget title, so give it a try and I don't think you'll be disappointed. Now for the creme de la creme. We've talked a lot about Resident Evil already, so I'm just going to dive right into it. Tell me that doesn't radiate classic Resident Evil. Maybe in a slightly different jacket, one with lots of metal, nails and knives.
What the hell is even that?
Tormented Souls has it all. Bad voice acting, crazy story and creepy monsters. But that's not all. Resources are scarce, meaning you'll be conserving ammo by dodging around enemies trying not to get hit. And since this game has those classic tank controls, none of that is as easy as it sounds. Yes, this is the full package. That doesn't mean it's perfect. Did I mention how freaking hard this game is? Enemy hitboxes are huge. Plus the real damage sponges. On top of it all, the tapes you need to save the game are more precious than gold. Which all comes down to say, I'm bad at the game. Give it a try. Alright, that's it. Let me know what you think. I'm sure I missed 1,000 good horror games. Also check out here for 11 games like XCOM that you shouldn't miss. And I hope to see you in the next one.